Good morning or good afternoon to you all and to our audience. My name is Eline Chivo and I'm Senior Policy Analyst at the Center for Data Innovation, a think tank based in Brussels and in DC. And today I'm speaking to you from Brussels. And today, by the way, is the anniversary of the Treaty of Rome. For our broader audience, it may be too early in the morning, but we will post this video online with a recap later on. So first of all, thank you for joining us. The sun is shining here in Brussels, but the best idea you've had was to stay in and be able to be online with us for this webinar. We were supposed to host our first European AI policy conference today, but given the circumstances, it had to be postponed, and we will soon reveal the new date. So please stay tuned. I want to use the opportunity to thank all our sponsors and our partners who made it possible for us to shape it all up. And please stay tuned with us for future webinars that we will propose to you in the coming weeks to keep you inside your homes. And stay tuned by signing up to our newsletter to find out more about those future webinars. Today, we're here to discuss the European AI priorities for the next 6 months during the next hour. This year was set to be the one for forging the foundations for AI regulation in Europe for the future decades. But the window for the EU to establish an AI strategy that will strengthen its position in the global digital economy is rapidly narrowing. While Europe has many assets to build a strong AI ecosystem, it also trails behind its peers, such as the US and China, in terms of adoption, commercialization, and investment. And there needs to be a regulatory framework at the same time that promotes innovation and enables access to data. So what are the priorities the EU should focus on in the coming months? And how should EU policymakers strengthen R&D and retain talent? How can Europe create a foundation for future innovation in AI? And what are the priorities really that the EU should focus on to be in the driver's seat? I will first introduce our guests before we dive into the conversation. And as there may be some time for Q&As from you all, our attendees, please go to slide.do as a participant and join us by using the hashtag AI policy to post your questions there. With me today, and thank you all for making some time, we have Irina Orsic, Team Leader AI at DG Connect in the Unit of Technologies and Systems for Digitizing Industry at the European Commission. We have Eligis Sivilis, Vice Minister, Ministry of the Economy and Innovation of the Republic of Lithuania, live from Vilnius. We have Sylvia Hipman-Stepin, who is Manager Public Policy and Government Relations at Google, and Magdalena Piesch, Head of Regulatory Affairs at Allegro, but also Chair at the European Tech Alliance. Unfortunately, Felix from GE Healthcare was not able to join us, but we thank him anyway for having committed to this event in the first place. Thank you all for joining. I will start with you, Irina. The new Commission has really signaled an intent to speed up work on digital policy issues, including AI. And I think many people would be curious to know where the Commission stands on these plans. So there's this consultation that is open until May 31st, but there are calls to push back this deadline. So my question would be, has the current COVID-19 crisis delayed EU plans, or has it given more urgency to these issues? And maybe some even would suggest those plans should be rewired.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for having us here in this not very usual setting. I think we can see from the way we are sitting here talking to each other the importance of digital, in particular in these times, and how much, in spite of all the restrictions, it helps us with our life. So for that kind of video setting, but also with possibilities to order things online, with the possibility to be, after all, contacted to our families, to our friends. So I think now many people feel how important digital is, and in particular those who do not have yet a good connection, which is something anyway, which has a priority as well. But this is more on a general level. Now, on the concrete level, I think the first priority now is really to see how digital and how AI in particular can contribute to facilitating, to facing the crisis, to help fighting the virus. And there we can see quite a few possibilities. For example, we have the 3D printing of masks. We do have a facial mask, but we also have, I don't know whether you saw it, it went through the news these days, a startup, I think from Italy, which does with the help of diving masks and 3D printing respiratory masks. So there is a mixture of digital and a lot of creativity. We have indeed care roboters, which are very, very important these times. We have a system of scans, AI-based scans to recognize whether somebody has to detect corona. Or we have high-performance computers working really on finding vaccines, helping to find medication. So there are plenty of immediate priorities, and these indeed are not directly linked to the white paper we launched on 19th of February, but indirectly there is let's say there's a very, very practical link on research, on what we can do, on skills, on everything. Now, on the level of the white paper itself and the announcement to have legislation at the end of, to propose legislation at the end of the year, and also on the public consultation, for now, we don't see much of a change, but I really want to underline the for now. So the public consultation is running. We already have many, many contributions. So it seems that people also take the time to contribute. For now, it is not planned to prolong the deadline, but indeed this might be re-evaluated any day, depending on how the crisis evolves. And then indeed we are planning to have plenty of stakeholder meetings. So we are going to have public hearings. We are going to have very targeted consultations on different topics. Part of this can be done online, part of it not. So the priority is there, and we really need to assess this on depending on how the crisis evolves. But for now, we also feel that we have time to think things through and to read and to consult. And it is at this point not the worst way of working. Ask me again in 1 week or in 2 weeks, and I might completely change the opinion on this, but for now, yeah, it works.
Thank you. Elijah, then what would be your reaction from the perspective of a member state in Lithuania? How do you see these plans coming together? And from, again, a member state perspective, you know, do you think there should be more urgency, more emphasis on making those plans happen? Let's just take the time more for consulting, or what is your perspective?
Well, firstly, I'm highly excited that Aline and your whole institute has organized this event, because this is basically the only event I'm having on the last couple of weeks, which is related to this topic. And we as a country were highly excited about the data strategy, about the AI white paper, and we're really like, doing a lot of homework to understand what's next and how we should prepare as a country. But this is now, just like Muhammad Ali said, that, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And I should admit, we really got it really painful punch in the face. And we dropped absolutely everything what comes inside the country when it comes to technologies. I mean, just because, the future has happened just overnight. Overnight, we switched the whole education online. Overnight, we switched the whole sectors working remotely, and overnight, we had to make really difficult decision when it comes to the recovering and sustaining economies. So on one hand, it lost a priority. It's not, so to speak, on our agendas. However, I see a huge opportunity for tech companies to shine, and especially on AI products. So instead of our European conservative way that, hey, let's wait, let's see, let's test if this is, you know, a trusted source on doing something. Now we have, so to speak, a little bit different situation where the countries are locked down, where recently the announcement on the GDPR has been published that it's not, so to speak, that strict anymore during those difficult times. And this is the moment where AI should shine up. And in the country, all of a sudden, the startups that were, for example, having open shops where you have no people, no contact with whatsoever, like Pizzeria, where they have fully AI-driven shops. These are basically now the future things that's happening today. So I think, all in all, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the brave new world, which has happened overnight, and where technologies are given now a huge mandate, you know, to build this new world, which I think will not be as it was before this crisis.
Thank you. I remember when you spoke once at an event I attended, you said, because you've worked a lot with fintechs, startups in Lithuania, that, you know, these companies don't wait. They just want to innovate. They just want to continue to do their work. So it's nice that if we can maintain this dynamism, and thank you for this positive perspective on what's happening. Now I want to turn to you, Magda. So perhaps you have some reactions initially to what your two fellow panelists already said, but maybe you could also just refocus the discussion on what do you think should be the EU's top policy priorities to really boost the use and development of AI in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Aline. Thank you for having me. I think I would echo what has been said. You know, this situation has from one day to another showed us how digital is essential. It became a by default option from one day to another. We've been struggling to get there, but now we're just forced to do that. I would say that also AI and technologies are really helpful. Even at Allegro, which is an online marketplace, we've seen some technologies based on algorithms being used to ensure safety of our consumers in terms of, for example, detecting offers which are might be misleading and might be at excessive price. We're very closely cooperating with the national consumer protection authorities and also want to be helpful for the Commission as Allegro and European Tech Alliance. So I think, yes, this is, an actual test, right, on how digital Europe is, and a proof that we need to be very digital these days. So fully agree with what has been said. So I think that to come back to the debate that we're having about AI and the European future, just to tell you a bit about Allegro, we are an online marketplace that is active in Poland. We have 22 million users account registered, among that 140,000 SMEs selling through our platforms, 100 million offers available. So to make a long story short, a lot of data, lots and lots of data, lots of users. So with the goal that we have of allowing sellers and buyers to come together and shop online and offer them the best user experience with the use of tools like search engine, data analytics, advertising solutions. You know, for us, there's no doubt that algorithm-based solutions, machine learning, AI can play a key role there. It's some kind of leverage in offering innovative solutions, but also a bit at the back end to improve our processes, which otherwise would have been done by people that normally should be dedicated to something more sophisticated, I would say. And we see it, how AI can also improve efficiency, streamline processes. So although we are not AI in the core of our activity, we observe this debate because we know that that's the direction we want to take. To be able to contribute to this debate, Allegro took part in AI pilot that was organized around the high-level expert group on AI. And I think this experience was very useful, both for us as public policy people, but also for our tech team, data experts, to have a reflection on the processes, on are we in line with thinking about fundamental rights and data protection, etc. And I think that to share the finding, the conclusion that we had is that in a vast majority of the processes that we use machine learning or AI, because that's the entire debate about the definition of AI, but in principle, we don't see the high exposure to fundamental rights or any risk to fundamental rights. For us, it's rather, these are simple processes which do not imply such risk, and where they could, for example, where personal data is involved, they are broadly protected by GDPR safeguards. So I think that this conclusion is quite common for companies like ours, for retail companies that use, I would say, low-risk applications. And we were very happy to see that the Commission in the white paper adopted a very similar approach when there's a need to differentiate between high risk and low risk. So I think this is pretty much the background, and to go to answer your question more directly. So I think how the Europe should support broad implementation. I think first of all we need to make sure that these solutions are proportionate, avoid red tape. Tech people don't like paperwork in general. They like to innovate, and as Elias said, act rather than write papers. We need to ensure that everything we will have is what is precisely necessary to cover gaps that we're having, and that the regulation doesn't overlap with the existing frameworks, be it product safety or GDPR. And I think last but not least, we need to make sure that these rules safeguard the competitiveness of European companies, that new rules are applicable and enforceable versus all the players that are active in Europe. And I think this is very visible in the white paper from the Commission. I hope it will stay like that until the end of the legislative process.
Thank you very much, Magda. And I'm aware the European AI Alliance, European Tech Alliance, sorry, produced a paper on what should be the priorities for AI in Europe. Thank you again for your contribution, because that ties in nicely with the next question, which would be for you, Sylvia, representing Google. I was curious whether you had any reactions to what Magda said. What is your own perspective on the Commission's work for AI policies, how you're looking at this white paper, and also let's also add, so what kind of role do you see for both EU and non-EU companies in supporting Europe's AI capabilities, and how do you plan to engage in the next steps?
A lot of questions in one, but let me maybe kind of start off, first of all, thanking you for hosting that debate. I think all of us are so eager to connect on this topic. And I think in the current situation, it's actually kind of a very valuable input to the consultation and debate we have about Europe. And I see that mostly in two areas. Of course, all of us actually mentioned broader benefits of AI. And I think that crisis and kind of use of some of the applications in that context also kind of allows us to think about that. I can give you an example from a couple of examples from work at Google. First of all, similar to what Magda said about the use of AI to kind of support the workforce, for instance, for content moderation on YouTube, to relieve some of the employees from doing that themselves, we are applying AI algorithms. But maybe what is actually most interesting in that kind of ties in what Irina was saying about, for instance, applying the supercomputers and AI to discovery. You might have heard that DeepMind, which is part of our kind of broader alphabet family, has been conducting a research actually on protein predictions that are related to COVID-19. They have been using the kind of something which is called AlphaFold. It's a very kind of technical term, but it's essentially a deep learning, machine learning system that they have been applying, for instance, in this very famous AI quest in the chess, where AlphaGo has actually won, and they have been, using the artificial intelligence to actually think about what could be the drug discovery, how those proteins of that particular virus are being composed. And we have been very pleased that the European Commission actually has reached out to us to kind of combine this knowledge. And I think that's, first of all, this is something that shows the benefit of the technology, of course, not kind of supplementing anything. I think we should not be fooling ourselves that AI is some sort of miracle solution to all of that, but I think it has a benefit and it has some sort of supporting role. But I think it also kind of shows us and gives us direct feedback to the white paper and to discussions around AI and what solutions we need. For instance, in that case of DeepMind AI research, I think an important consideration is that that research was mostly conducted on open source data that was actually not coming from Europe, but was coming from kind of global sources. But when we think about technologies and AI, those are kind of global solutions. And I think limiting potentially some AI training models only to using European data would significantly limit those capabilities that we need in the current crisis. And I think that applies to AI also in kind of, let's say, normal situation. And I think also kind of the speed of actions, like when we think, I totally agree with Magda about like defining high risk in a very good way. And I think overall Google has been very supportive to the direction that the Commission has been taking and showing that there are myriad of AI applications, that there is definitely not one size fits all. And some issues might rise risk, others not. I think what's kind of what that crisis is kind of exposing, that there might be also even some risk in not using AI in situation when there is some urgency, when there are some solutions that can complement other non-AI related solutions. So I think that's kind of this is actually a concept called risk substitution. I think that's important to factor in defining what high risk is, and not only focusing on all the bad stuff, but also seeing that there might be a cost of not using AI in certain circumstances. So that's maybe to kind of to complement the discussion ongoing in terms of how Google has been involved very much, I would say, very much since the very beginning. We have been member of the high-level expert group since 2018. Probably many of you know, if you follow AI debate, we have our own ethical AI principles already for almost 2 years. Of course, we are engaging with the Commission at the national level, but this is not only at the kind of, I would say, regulatory element. Of course, we have AI research centers in Paris, Berlin, Amsterdam, Zurich. There is a lot of vibrant exchange in terms of seeing the potential of AI. There is, of course, research collaborations, very practical collaborations with industry. Many of partners are using, for instance, our open source platform. So there are millions of examples. I'm not going to now mention them all, but I would say we are very kind of keen to be part of that discussion. And of course, as AI first company, we are using AI for our products, but also have a lot of lessons that we learned on how to make sure that AI is trustworthy and responsible. And that's the contribution we want to fit into the consultation.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. And I'd like to bring back Irina to the discussion because we've heard, some of the panelists mention the importance of data and also the current context that we're in. So yes, because when it comes to the availability of data, Europe seems to be lagging behind China and the US, and the EU is seeking to boost its data sovereignty through the AI white paper and the data strategy. But some have started to argue that the limitation of this proposal and others have been exposed by the COVID-19 crisis. Say if you're working on something like a vaccine and you want to move quickly, you need to rely on a much broader set of data than, say, European data. So I wanted to ask your take on what are the steps that the EU can take to increase access to training data for AI and machine learning systems. What are the intentions?
I think the answer, the miracle we are working on are the data lakes, the data pools. So for different players to share data, but also to create the right infrastructure around for sharing data. So having the interoperability, having contracts, having clear rules, but also, for example, clarifying questions of competition policy and other issues which might be relevant around that. So this is key of the data strategy. This is an important first step to do, and it is not that Europe is having a lack of data. We are very, very strong in some fields, for example, on the industrial data, on the business to business side. But what we want to address with that is actually that these are rather smaller, how do you say, amounts of data, and the necessity basically to work with larger data sets. So this is part of the answer. Yeah, I don't know whether I got to all the parts of your questions.
Well, I do. I'm keeping an eye on Slido, where our participants can still log their questions. And one participant is asking, in the context of the COVID crisis, should the AI white paper and the other EU strategies presented so far, should these be reconsidered? What would be your...
Actually, that answer is relatively easy because the strategies are all now in public consultation. So if one finds that a reconsideration is necessary and that this is now completely wrong, we are happy to receive any contribution. And from the beginning, also before the crisis, it was clear that this would be up to public consultation and that we will very carefully study the replies we get. And indeed, as everybody says right now, the world is not going to be the same after the crisis. So it might well be that there are certain things which after the crisis, after the public consultation, we will reconsider. But in a way that was clear from the beginning that was a strategy for consultation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. Back to you, Eligius. How do you see the European approach coming together in terms of what will be possible in this context? Where do you see member states can take the lead? How will it all come together to implement a truly, coordinated and cross-border European approach when it comes to AI?
Yeah, I think this is a key to success is the participation of the member states, because I think we have to come both ways, top down, what European Commission is doing great, but also bottom up. So now, if I try to figure out what other countries are doing, I still find this really strange, behavior where everyone pretends to be a front runner or super advanced in AI, while in reality they're not. I mean, I don't want now to point my finger to any of the countries, but I want us, to be really honest and collaborative at this level. So we, as an example in the country, we understand that those white papers and that regulation that is coming up, this won't solve our problems, because only us, we can solve our own problems. And for this reason, we are running our AI think tank, which is a same group of people who made a strategy, but then we extended it into the wider team, and we divided ourselves into 5 different streams. So it's a future of AI, trusted AI, sourced AI, research AI, and pop AI. So basically, we're trying to learn by doing what that means, this whole regulation, and how can we benefit on the country level. So I think we should not get locked, just like what we have done with the single digital market, where everyone had the commitment to implement building blocks like e-delivery, e-signature, e-IDAS regulation, but then all of a sudden we find out that not all of the countries done their homework. So I think this is really important for every country, you know, to dedicate themselves to work on this, their own understanding what's the impact for the government, for the legislation, and only then you can feed back to European Commission and have this constructive conversation. So far, I think we're doing that right, but I think we have to go into more experiments rather than just, you know, planning and measuring. And, you know, I agree with conversations, but I think experiments, that's something helps us to really understand where we are. So a good example could be ourselves on this conversation about the data, right? So the data, apparently Europe is losing behind, but we don't really understand what it is. I mean, why are we losing behind? Because it looks like we have everything. I mean, we have information systems, we have data, and in the country, we made a data map. So we basically made inventory of every single data field we are collecting as a government. And we came up with this brilliant picture where shows the real time, what are the links between the data, who is sharing, what are the integrations. But this is just, you know, a picture through the glass, which we cannot access. We cannot access that data. So by this exercise, we realized that, okay, I mean, we have to have tools to control our data, because now we see this, we see where the data goes, but we cannot access it, or we don't know how to implement that technically. And I see the whole team is really growing by doing those simple exercises or in our own, so to speak, sandboxes.
That's very interesting. Thank you. And that brings me to a question for you, Magda. How do European companies see all this? This, you know, the importance of data is one. Why are we lagging behind? Then what is preventing us from experimenting or using the data? What more would European companies need?
Yes, thank you, Elin. You kindly mentioned the European Tech Alliance at the end of my first intervention. So I think this is a great opportunity to answer from this perspective. As you may know, the European Tech Alliance that I have the honor to be the chair of brings together 30 European tech champions, scale-ups, not that much startups, but rather more mature companies with the success already and a record of many users. So in total, we have currently 30 companies from 16 countries and still growing. Contrary to what is often being said, we believe that Europe is good at tech and that, you know, our sector is driving jobs and growth across the continent, and we see ourselves as a best examples to prove that point. Our goal is to support decision makers in these debates, and for that reason, EUTA launched high-level principles on AI this February in the European Parliament. For us, we have no doubt that AI is critical for our companies to be able to innovate and compete globally. We use AI to enhance our efficiency and productivity, but at the same time to innovate and offer the best products to our consumers and businesses. We, of course, encourage the development of human-centric AI, which are based on, you know, the regulation that we have and the European way of looking at data privacy, etc. And we do recognize that there is a need to identify and address some challenges that AI may pose, being legal uncertainty that Irina mentioned, or even ethical questions that may arise in case of some applications. So in the paper, we were trying to give some practical examples of how machine learning or AI application contribute to our day-to-day operations. So, and by doing this, brings tangible benefits to consumers and business. So just to give you a few examples, of course, I'm guessing well-known personalized music or books recommendations, which are based on your listening or shopping habits that allow you to enjoy more new music that you wouldn't otherwise discover. For example, retail, we see AI-based solution bundling parcels in the e-commerce that allow to choose the fastest and the greenest way to deliver goods to consumer. We see, for example, in retail offering the best clothing, the shoes which are similar to shoes that you are looking for, etc. Or even in case of ensuring more security solutions that allow to detect frauds in case of, for example, holiday accommodation. So these applications, I would say, are rather straightforward. It's rather straightforward that they do not bring fundamental rights, but it should not be somehow overlooked how valid or crucial they are for our efficiency and competitiveness in the broader scale. So in this case, what EUTA was advocating for is to not take a strong position on these kind of applications. We don't really see the need to further regulate these type of low risk applications. We believe that self-regulations that would be inspired on ethical guidelines for trustworthy AI, which would allow to raise awareness, but also be agile and flexible enough for each company to reflect on that, would be the best option. We think that this discussion has to be very well informed, and also a broader look has to be taken at this debate, because as you've mentioned, for AI we need data, right? If we have too strict regulation from e-privacy, for example, and there's a limited access to data, then it might not be coherent. So when we talk about AI, we need to see a broader perspective of various legislation that we have been working, or we will be working on. And as I said, this has to be the main, this very data-driven approach and proportionality approach must be there through the entire regulatory process, in the European Parliament, in the member states, which I hear are very practical in approaching this topic. I think other recommendations, and I invite you all to consult the paper in depth, because I'm just trying to give you a taste of that. Other recommendations were indeed to build a pan-European data and AI commons, to revise restrictions to data, but maybe also use some regulatory sandboxes to be able to experiment. Then, of course, ensure that AI regulations are future-proof, that there are more synergies between public and private research, that we are able to attract and maintain best talents in Europe. And this is something that is very much into competences of member state. But, if there's no, similar as education, but if there's no understanding and I think support or encouragement from the side of the Commission and member state, this, simply by lacking talented and competent people, we may not win the race that we're taking part of. And of course, we think that there's a lot of there's an importance in promoting EU capacity building and independence in terms of supply of components and computing systems. But of course, this cannot happen from one day to another because economy is, intertwined, and also European companies are using with the big benefit of some technologies provided by other actors from other continents. So I think this is what European companies need, and we're looking forward to this debate, also to share experience that we've collected now in this circumstances.
Thank you for sharing your recommendations so candidly. I'm going to give one last word to you, Sylvia, before we turn to some of the questions from participants. Perhaps you have some reactions to what Magda just shared. Actually, I was wondering also if you could complement what she mentioned, especially regarding a pan-European AI common approach. Shouldn't this also be more apprehended at the global level?
Yes, I mean, from the perspective of Google being the global company, I think kind of coherence, or at least coordination of different approaches to AI is important, both on kind of investment, on research and regulatory levels. I can definitely second that. Maybe a thought that was kind of triggered by discussion of my co-panelist was, I think one focus in Europe is very much a right one on development on AI. That's why we are thinking about the need of data, the need of kind of engineering talent, which is really great and good in Europe. But I think maybe something that is somehow not that much highlighted is deployment of AI in existing companies. I think we shouldn't be kind of always thinking that all companies in Europe should become like, I don't know, very only for AI experts. It's sometimes not feasible for smaller companies, but they can very much change their businesses and kind of learn new skills and adopt AI in their business activities. And that's also something that from company with a global remit, that's something that we are also kind of pursuing, not only focusing on kind of how we develop our products and our focus on research, but also about how do you help those players that maybe are not cutting edge AI developers, but actually want to improve their business there. And maybe one example that I would mention, that's a kind of a collaboration in Italy, where we worked with a university that developed actually something which was called machine learning checkup. So any kind of startup could come and be tested about like what kind of capabilities would make sense for their particular business in terms of AI, and that they would be pointed to either a kind of an advisor or kind of to already existing open source tools. There is a lot of that already happening. For instance, I mentioned already the TensorFlow tool, but also if you think about APIs, many kind of cloud players are also offering those as so-called even building blocks for if you want to use, for instance, vision technology, you can apply it across all different sectors. It's essentially technology neutral approach that can be applied to all different types of sectors and problems. So what I would want to basically now add is yes, of course, we need to think about data. That's important for development of AI, but there is also a second part of it being deployment, and of course focus on skills, focusing on how you do increase capacities of existing businesses that are not going to be AI developers, they are going to be users of technology. I think it's also something that we shouldn't miss in the discussion.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. I see, Eligius, you raised your hand. You wanted to perhaps come in with a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment to Sylvia, although small businesses are not the expert, but don't underestimate. We had an amazing example this week, right after we announced quarantine for the whole country and that the all retail and small shops being closed now. We hosted a webinar explaining that there is no quarantine on internet. And it was a highly successful webinar with some 12,000 viewers, and overnight we got new 72 small medium enterprises setting up their e-commerce platform. So we make, the demand together with supply of IT companies where they actually put the extra effort, and it was happened just in one day. So now, in addition to this, I mean, me personally, I see this as a huge opportunity to make this digital transformation for everyone, even for the SMEs. And we have started a new website, which is Lithuanian, unfortunately, but it's, so to speak, godigital.lt, but it's in Lithuanian, skaitmenizuokis.lt, which is about basically proposing for SMEs to give this specific consultation on how they can use even AI algorithms in their business models now that they have all of a sudden overnight make it turn around in what they're doing. And I should say the success is huge. And even more, me being as a government official, we are also working on those economy, those money that we will put in the economy, trying, to mitigate the burden that this crisis has created. We won't give it just by this. I'm actually trying to put now the mandatory digital skills training for everyone who's being laid off, and if they want to get a compensation, they will get the compensation after they complete a digitization course, depending on the level, depending on the industry, depending on the very specific, so to speak, use case. But we want use this as an opportunity, right, to really break through as a nation in the digital world.
I think this is one of the very useful examples that show that Europe has, there's been a lot of those initiatives in very quickly in just a few days, and there's a lot of potential in sharing that at EU level, making sure everyone is aware that those opportunities exist. Irina, I see you raised your hand. There's a lot of questions for you on Slido, but please step in if you wanted to add something.
No, we can also first take the questions. Actually, what I wanted to do is to quickly reply to the last 3 comments on what companies need and how member states act, but I can also do that later depending on the questions coming in.
Well, please go ahead. If you can squeeze that in just a couple of minutes, and then, yeah, I'll be happy to present you some questions.
Okay, I try to be quick. So particularly with regard to Alicia, so this is super interesting what you are doing, and I completely agree that we can't have a solution like Europe met put on member states, but this is exactly why we are having the coordinated plan, and this is also the other part of the white book, the excellence, the ecosystem of excellence. And there, indeed, I believe it's very important for member states, also for regions, for companies to do things, but then also to have a European forum, also several to discuss this, to exchange best practice, but then also for us as the Commission to try to create a maximum of synergies, a maximum of complementarities, and to really help in a way combining the efforts. So be it, for example, with regard to testing and experimentation exactly and digital innovation hubs, so testing experimentation facilities, digital innovation hubs, to help the transfer from research into the market, and not to create the same structures in all the member states individually, but try to find synergies. Who can do what, who can help where. It's not that we need to test the same things everywhere, but we need to have good facilities, and we need to have contacts for companies where they can then concretely test for their own business how a certain application would work. And there, this is the excellence part of the white paper. We see a lot of potential added value, and it would be good also to get comments on that. Just one other comment, which is on getting the public and the private research closer. So this is also part of the white paper, to have a public-private partnership, exactly looking on how we can focus the research better, on how we can create synergies. And with all that, it's really like, it's the approach to have the member states doing a lot, but also to try to combine it in an ideal way to get the best out of it and to build on our forces, on our strengths. So we all have different strengths, to put them together to a more holistic picture. Thanks.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn to the participants' dashboard on Slido, and I'm going to pick those that you can like those those questions. And popular ones would be for you, Irina. What do you see, as we mentioned, the EU, US, need to work with global allies too? What do you see would be the main priorities for transatlantic? So both EU, US, but also in the context of NATO, actually. What do you see that are the main priorities for transatlantic coordination on AI in the next year? If you could say something about that. And another question would be, how does the Commission envision the possible voluntary labeling of low-risk AI applications? It's true that we discuss much more high-risk applications and sectors, but there is something about voluntary labeling in the white paper.
Thank you. On the transatlantic priorities, I think it's just key, and this is also in the white paper, to keep the dialogue going. To keep the dialogue with international fora like the OECD, like the WTO, like the United Nations, but also indeed to be in the bilateral dialogues, and we have to be there, and to see we are sharing such a lot, in particular in terms of values and tradition. So how we can build on that together. And in a way, what I said about the European synergies, to a certain extent, in this would also apply to transatlantic synergies. The second question with regard to the voluntary labeling, this is something where we are also waiting for the input from the consultation. This is something where we are basing ourselves very much on the high-level expert group and the testing of the assessment list of the guidelines for trustworthy AI. So this is all still work in progress. It could be that the requirements which will be compulsory for high-risk applications could apply also for all the others, but on a voluntarily basis linked to a label. It could also be that these requirements would not be 100% fitting the needs of such a label, and that then they would be modified accordingly. These are questions we are currently working on. And then in practice, there are quite a few labels around. We have all the eco labels, we have the energy saving levels. So we are looking for different inspirations there, and we will try to propose something which then really fits the AI, which is creating as much trust as possible and necessary, and which doesn't create too much administrative burden in the same time. But yeah, that's it.
But speaking of which, there is something in the white paper that's been the focus of critiques, that was actually adding some bureaucracy through a potential ex-ante conformity assessment. And one of the questions that just came up as quite popular is that so the Commission wants certain AI systems to, for instance, detect the spread of a virus to be pre-approved before use, based on what we're reading in the white paper. And the question is, wouldn't this make Europe less innovative and less safe and more exposed to risks in general?
But here we are again with the high-risk applications. So this would not be for the labeling. This would, at least not with all the procedure of conformity assessment and everything and all its complexity. Now there one really needs to see how this could be done. But the idea is to have the stricter requirements really only for the high-risk applications, and then to see how the labeling could work, whether I don't know whether there's really the need to have a conformity assessment as well, or whether there could be other ways to do that. This is really something we are reflecting right now. And this is also something where we appreciate any input to the public consultation, any idea, any way to balance the two interests.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to wrap up by giving you the word one last time, starting again with you, Irina, with two questions, because circling back to the timeline we're looking at, I wanted to know if you could kindly summarize perhaps what are the next milestones we're really looking at following this consultation on the white paper. And then my other question would be to you and to your fellow panelists, what does success in the AI sector would look like for Europe?
Thank you. The first question, so for now, and I said this before, for now the timeline is not being changed. This might still happen. For now, the public consultation would close on the 31st of May. We would then have a big public consultation event according to current planning mid-September. Actually, this is already the third date we are envisaging. We had, no, it's the fourth actually. We had end of April, we had mid-May, we had mid-June. So now we are reserving the rooms for mid-September. That would be the bigger event. And then we would also have as milestones really targeted consultations, asking experts, really trying to go into the very detail of what certain legal provisions would imply in practice for companies, for players, for everybody. And on that basis, we would still aim of having a legal proposal on the regulatory framework in December. And in parallel, we would also have an update of the coordinated plan with member states, where one of the focuses could be on the national strategies, on how we can learn from each other. But then also, and that gets me to your second question, how AI can contribute to climate change. And so where do I see success? So we are currently, well, I think the idea is to talk about future success, if I understand your question well. Or do you want to have, so future success, I think, would be AI that is deployed in Europe. So there are much more applications, and in a way that can contribute to a better world, that can contribute to our health systems, for example, what is now the issue, that can contribute to climate change, that can contribute to our well-being, our societal and environmental well-being of the society. And this indeed, to a certain extent, also implies competitiveness.
Thank you. Who would like to come in next to explain what to them, what success in the AI sector looks like for Europe? Magda, perhaps?
Yes, I can. I would echo what Irina said, probably by turning a bit the question, because the question was about success in AI sector. I would say, how the European economy, how consumers, business, and the broader society can benefit from AI applications and employment, along the society, be it economy, be it safety, be it climate change. I think that the AI and algorithms are simply, especially advanced algorithms, can leverage our capacity to address the challenges that we're facing. And I think the goal is to make this use as simple as possible. And on the other hand, where these users, applications might might pose some risk, we need to make sure that the current rules we have and the fundamental rights are well secured. So that's how I would answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Eligius?
Yeah, well, I will get back to the point from which I have started. Now we have a huge drama happening on the stage, and this is now the moment for technologies and especially AI to step into those lights and show what it can. This weekend, we had a huge hackathon with 900 participants and 50 teams in the country calling, to hack the crisis. And out of those deliverables we had over the weekend, we had quite several very promising ideas how we can use technology and AI to solve the current crisis. So my personal take is now during this week to do as much as possible of prototyping and setting that into action. And if we see that works, this will immediately get an attention, because now even myself being a digital native person, I have to do things which I'm not trained to. And these are, for fighting the crisis. And I would like, that we can prove ourselves, the existence, each country, that this technology is the way to proceed. So if we build this trust now, we won't be discussing about the trustful AI in the future from very beginning again.
Thank you. Sylvia, final word to you, just in a minute if you can. Thank you.
Yes, I'm definitely in agreement with my co-panelist. I think we can use that crisis to think creatively about how AI has benefits, but also maybe some limitations. And I think we should also realize that there might be some costs related to actually not using AI. So I think the broader approach could be to spreading that across all different sectors. And when we design any kind of policy solutions to that we actually think about specific problems, that we don't use sweeping definitions, that we actually really focus on like the speed, about the practicalities, problems, and tailored smart regulatory approaches. And I'm very positive. I think we see AI benefits across all the different domains. And what Irina mentioned, I think another kind of important area beyond the current crisis is, of course, sustainability and climate actions. And there are also a lot of cutting edge solutions from increasing efficiency to better forecasting. I think we only are going to see a massive wave of AI contribution. And I think Europe is well positioned to play that role. And I think it's an exciting topic to be involved. And that was a very interesting discussion. So thanks for having me as a part of it.
Thank you all. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you to our audience as well for all the questions and bearing with us. Thank you for also making sure that we do not lose sight of AI in this bizarre context. I'd like to make sure everyone knows we have a next webinar scheduled on March 31st. Please do stay tuned with us to find out more. Stay tuned, stay safe, stay inside. Thank you very much, you all, and see you again soon. Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a nice day.